Hello, everyone. You are listening to the Immersive Medicine Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to discuss regulation and reimbursement for digital therapeutics. Join us as we dive into the importance of regulation, barriers to reimbursement, and examples in the industry that we can learn from. Thank you all for joining us today. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Cody. I'm your co-host, and I am a music therapist and therapy designer with years of clinical experience using media as medicine in mental health, rehabilitation, and neurologic disorders. With me today is my fellow co-host, Kiki.
Hi, I'm Kiki or Kira. I'm a digital arts and media educator with a background in production and broadcasting, and also arts and video games. Toby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Toby, and on my license as an occupational therapist, it says Hadijat Matal Lady Jew. I'm an occupational therapist that has a background working with adults in brain injury, and I spent some years doing that. And I also worked with adults with spinal cord injuries and stroke, as well as I found my little home in pediatrics and worked with children with various needs, and all had an inkling to combine gaming into everything because I'm a lifelong gamer.
Right. I'm Ryan Douglas. I'm one of the founders of Deepwell and of the venture studio behind it, New Fluent, that works on neurological therapies and new concepts and designs. And we focus on mind, brain, and spine. And I do therapy design work as well with Deepwell, and love hanging out with all these folks and talking about immersive medicine.
Amazing. It's great to have you all with us, as always. I'm really excited to dive into our conversation today. So, towards the end of our last episode, to catch people up, we brought up the topic of FDA clearance for digital therapeutics and how regulation is important to discern between the hundreds and thousands of wellness apps that are on the market and the handful of fully fledged digital therapeutics. So today, I thought it would be really good for us to go more in depth on the topic and unpack the current landscape of regulation and reimbursement for digital therapeutics. Before we get started, though, I think it would be great for us to maybe define and redefine immersive medicine and digital therapeutics for our listeners today to kind of recap our last episode. Ryan, do you want to maybe give us some definitions right off the top of your head?
Yeah, so I'm learning things right now. First of all, Cody gets prepared. You see how he's got a list? He's just coming, and we're like, So I wrote this 2 seconds ago, but I think after watching what we did last time, especially around immersive medicine, we need to get really clear what we're talking about. So immersive medicine is the blending of media and medicine to create new treatment solutions. And it comes in a lot of different modalities. One of them is as a digital therapeutic, and we can talk about that. I'll talk about that definition in a moment. It also comes in as media plus talk therapy or other sorts of occupational type therapies. That's what Toby's talking about doing. Media plus medical device. So bringing in the digital therapeutic or a portion of the media to augment medical device, to media plus prehab or rehab. So something that gets you prepared for the delivery of a therapy or surgery, or brings you out the other side of that with a faster recovery time. And then media plus pharmaceutical. So it's a broad ranging situation. The concept being here that media is brought in to enhance and change the outcomes from the medical environment. And in some cases, like digital therapeutics, media is the entirety of the therapeutic. And so when you talk about digital therapeutics, this is a defined term. It's really important to understand that it is what we say it is here currently, though people are using it a lot of different ways. Digital therapeutics, or DTX, deliver medical interventions directly to patients using evidence-based, clinically evaluated software to treat, manage, and prevent a broad spectrum of diseases and disorders. That ties into today because we're talking about treating, preventing, mitigating, diagnosing disease. And when you're doing that, there is only one way you can do that. And then if you're in the United States, that's with FDA clearance. In your other parts of the world, if you're in Canada, that's Health Canada. So we do have a lot of folks that say that they have a digital therapeutic, and they may not recognize the moment what they have as a wellness app. Because if you don't have that regulatory approval, you are not living in the place of being a digital therapeutic at the moment. It's confusing because for from 2020 until 2023, a period until November 2023, the FDA was using something called enforcement discretion to allow wellness apps to position themselves as digital therapeutics to try and help during the COVID emergency order. But those times are over. And now if you're going to continue to put yourself out there to treat, mitigate, and otherwise diagnose or deal with disease, you're going to have that clearance.
Wow, that was great for just off the top of your head. Thank you so much for sharing, Ryan. Anyone have any kind of additions to that, or any other words to put that in, or maybe just to summarize it?
I think you just tied it up with a bow.
Yeah, that was great.
Say, how are we supposed to say anything after that?
Follow up on that. No, I
Ryan
totally
just dropped
agree.
the mic.
Beautifully done. Bravo.
Well, I guess with that in mind, that's a really great, I don't know, full explanation and definition for these two. I have a good question maybe to kind of get the conversation started now. So how about this? Why is regulation and reimbursement critical to the success and widespread adoption of immersive medicine and digital therapeutics? So really going into, why does this matter, and how is this going to bring this to the forefront and attention of, hopefully everyone around the world?
So I'll get this started, and then I'm going to turn this over to Toby a little bit because she's a practitioner and she's doing this all the time, right? And she thinks it's funny too. So, matter of fact, maybe we'll let Toby start. Go ahead, Toby.
Oh, okay. Oh man, I wish my ADHD didn't kick in at the last second you're asking that question.
There you go.
But I think in terms of like regulation, we want it to be safe. We want it to be regulated. Reimbursement kind of like goes hand in hand with that, especially when you're working on like insurance companies regulating what is the gold standard of level of care, right? We want that involved, especially when it comes to like digital therapeutics, because it's so easily accessible to everyone. Mm-hmm. Everyone that usually has like a phone in their hand, they have a computer. A lot of people now have access to digital media, and that's why it's good to go through the route of reimbursement and having those clearances and having insurances go through those checks and balances for the safety and well-being of everyone using it,
and including the industry. I mean, that's where I was going. Toby hit something that I was looking. As a practitioner, Toby's got a choice of 350,000 apps.
Yeah,
and then all the games that she can pick from. And how does she discern and understand what is safe and effective to use? She can either be somebody. She doesn't have to bring in a digital therapy, because as a practitioner, she can go off label and use what she wants to use within a certain sphere of authority. But it helps to understand what things have been clinically proven, what's happened. And it's really also important to distinguish these two things. The regulatory and the reimbursement, they go hand in hand, but they are not the same thing. Regulatory clearance is where you take something to a regulatory body, in this case, the FDA, and you show them, then you demonstrate to them that you have done the things that require to be done, that this is a safe and effective device. And really, you're submitting to them and saying, listen, here's all of the things I've done, which are substantial. This is not a small process. It's not a little bit of work to be done. And then they will look at it in its entirety, and they do not approve you unless you're a new device and usually implantable. They clear you. Clearing you means we're looking at everything that you've done, and that everything you've done is compliant the way we want it to be compliant. And then we're looking at what you say. We're clearing what you say because we like what you've done. What you say are indications for use. You start talking about how you would indicate this product to be used and in what particular environments it would be used: over the counter at home. Is it going to be used for a prescription device? Is it an aid for a therapist?
Right.
So this is all things that you got to get the okay to do. It's really important to understand how that fits into the landscape. 350,000 apps between the Play Store and Apple. 70,000 to 90,000 of them built during the COVID emergency order and labeling themselves as some form of digital therapeutic. Still today, about 20,000 of them will call themselves a digital therapeutic. 20 of them have been cleared by the FDA. 20.
Wow. And
when you get down to where we like to jam for the most part, which is mental health, that's 5. And we'll be talking about the fifth one is near and dear to my heart. We easing that into a little bit about what's going on. So that is your regulatory pathway. When you're all done getting FDA clearance, that's just the beginning to your reimbursable world.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a lot of other agencies that come into this, and I'll dig into it a little bit more. I got some slides that I can share to help understand this. But in the greatest level, just because you're cleared by the FDA does not at all mean that you're going to start getting reimbursed. There is then a whole series of groups that have to be involved in. There's different kinds of reimbursement. There's a kind of reimbursement that's HSA or your flex spending accounts in the United States. Those are actually governed by the IRS. The
Right.
IRS basically says if you're a wellness device, you're not something that goes in the HSA. So then in that case, the FDA really does help you get near it because being cleared as a medical device is a distinguishing factor for the FDA or for the IRS to go, yep, you can use this in your flex spending account. You can use pre-tax dollars and employer match dollars and stuff like that for that. Your next threshold, it comes from CMS. This is your Medicares and your Medicaids and stuff like that. Those are acts of Congress that come in and provide different kinds of care for folks that are over 65 or financially are not necessarily in the place where they could be covering all this stuff themselves. And they've also got special programs for kids and stuff like that.
Infants and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. So those programs, get, again, acts of Congress. They get to you moving through, and that's a significant market. We'll talk about that. And then there is the holy grail of coverage, which is all of people's personal health cares as well that go through the private companies. So your United Healthcares of the world and that kind of stuff. And those are at the discretion for the most part of the insurer. So, or what's called the payee, they don't have to pay for your thing unless you can show them that your thing has a greater level of efficacy. And honestly, what they're looking at is what's the cost versus the risk versus the reward.
Yeah.
So, we've seen some people, ADHD was one place where those of us in device were really kind of confused why digital therapeutics went there early on. Ritalin is 9 cents a day. That's what it costs the insurance company to manage it. If you're going to build a digital, and the Ritalin is not amazing, it doesn't have sort of the risk profile that we see in some of the SSRIs or some of the other places where we don't get so excited about it, and it doesn't have the cost structure. So if you're, let's call it XYZ insurance company, you're not going to necessarily be all that keen to flip over to a digital therapeutic at $100 a month when you've got this handled at 9 cents a day. And as far as you can show to the rest of the world, and I think you're doing just what you need to do. So there are very different levels that compel these folks to make this reimbursable. And it's a lot of work. And with the FDA is a lot of work. And then you turn around and getting reimbursement is a lot of work. And this is all kind of that gauntlet you've got to run from going to be something that you could sell to somebody as a wellness device all the way to something that is being reimbursed, or even in some cases, and this is where I think digital therapeutics are going, when you're super efficient at what you do, you're really good for people, and your cost structures are right, that's when you start to see actually more like endorsement or being sold through the private insurance company. So if you're a smoker today and you're with United Healthcare, sooner or later you're going to get an email that says, hey, we got a cessation program for you. Right. Someone built that program, and United's now literally front loading and pushing that out to as many of their patients as possible, because they know that it's worth paying for that for everybody that they've got, as opposed to watching them as a lifetime smoker, the cost that's going to accumulate over time. Mm-hmm. So we're definitely going to see that in mental health with digital therapeutics.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Well.
They do that for diagnosis, certain diagnoses as well. Like it's almost like there's a segue into like OT speech, and anyone gets like, if they get an autism diagnosis, that's
Mm-hmm.
like your automatic, like it's going to be, an easy, accessible depending on where you are, but an easy, accessible therapy that it will get approved versus like other stuff like hippotherapy and everything like that.
Or music therapy. A lot of this is it's very similar in the music therapy world. And I'd say the battle for music therapy being reimbursed goes on even longer than digital therapeutics. It's been a decades-long battle. But it's so difficult. I hear what Ryan is saying, right? Because a lot of it is what you're saying is showing the efficacy to the payee to say, is this worth what we're paying for the service? And a lot of the time, what music therapists are doing is much more specialized than what talk therapists or a psychotherapist would be doing, because we're taking the same principles, but using media and using music as really the driving therapeutic factor in those sessions. So it's much more specialized, but in insurance companies' eyes or in Congress's eyes so far, it just doesn't quite hit the same level as these, tried and true practices. So, I just understand firsthand how difficult it is to really go through regulation and reimbursement when you're already doing, such a great job. But it's so important to discern what we were talking about earlier. What are these things are actually good for you and are going to have these therapeutic outcomes, and what are, just kind of tooting their own horn or passing through the way they can. Yeah, it's super complex, and it's really exciting to see, I would say, the advancements and the movement that's happening in the digital therapeutic space so quickly. And what Ryan said, COVID was a really big factor for that, to see how much potential these digital tools are when we can't go in person for our normal therapies. So
I think
Absolutely.
COVID.
Accessibility to care is huge here. Sorry, go ahead, Toby.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think COVID kind of like, unfortunately,
Woke us up.
COVID, but fortunately had kind of proven that people want more access digitally to their
Yeah.
care.
I think
And
they
it's-
needed it, and we started to see the efficiencies, and you saw folks warming up to the idea. I mean, once upon a time, you'd said you were going to talk to a therapist over Zoom. First of all, that you'd have Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom was.
I was just hanging out with the guy yesterday who had a lot to do with WebEx being built, and I actually looked at him and said, "Why was it so bad?" He was kind of it was all put together early on, and Zoom was a better version of that, but none of us were all that keen on talking to each other on camera just a minute ago. So tons of accessibility to care showed up there. I think the thing I'll leave you with too is all of this brings rigor, and this rigor it costs money, so you have to do it efficiently.
Yeah.
But it means, like, when you're FDA cleared, the things that you're looking to do is you've got deep efficacy based research on why you are what you are. That either means you've shown that you're very equivalent to something else that's been tested all day long, or you've been tested all day long. You've got a panel of experts who've been looking at this thing with you. You've done deep risk analysis. You've done deep cyber analysis. You've taken a look at people's information, and you've thought about HIPAA, and you can see how all these things are fitting into all of this stuff. Really matters. I mean, if you think about it, if someone grabs a digital wellness app for their mental health and they load it on their phone and it's not done right, it immediately signals a vulnerability that's sitting right on your phone as a tab. And so that's not often, even some of these brands don't think about that. It's like, oh, sunshine of your soul is right here. And it's like, your boss comes up and goes, what's sunshine of your soul? And we talked about this in light therapy years ago too. We started making compact, small things for treatment for people, as opposed to a light that would signal to everybody that you were, a vulnerable population. And so we used to call them, the big ones, we used to call them the anti-promotion lights, because people would take them to work and it kind of signaled you couldn't handle your stuff.
Yeah, well, that really brings me to my next question: is how do you guys see regulation and reimbursement impacting patients and clinicians, game developers, creators, health, and the healthcare industry as a whole?
Yeah, I think that's really about. I see that coming through reimbursement. Reimbursement is the legitimizing and monetizing force to a new industry. So I think we should stand back right now and I'll be really truthful about where digital therapeutics is. It's in the trough of despair. If you guys understand how innovation happens, we get the hype curve, we get on the way up. We hit the hype curve with a couple of SPACs and some companies that we talked about last week. And then we come down the roller coaster ride of, oh my God, none of this is ever going to work. And now I'm going to show you guys today, we're peaking out, because the big things that are going on right now is there's levels of HSA reimbursements coming. It's coming for the software and the hardware, but it's based on the software. If the software is cleared, the hardware is an accessory and it can get covered as well. So that's going to bring great accessibility to care as well. You can't afford a VR headset, or if your phone requires an upgrade or something like that, at least a portion of that gets covered as long as the software comes on. So the reimbursement on that level starts legitimizing. Then the next level of reimbursement is coming in right now from CMS is going to pay the doctors, the MDs. And I think what you're seeing here is the way they're going to try to tackle the health emergency that we're dealing with, and mental health emergency and the loneliness epidemic in the United States. So they've looked around and said, we don't have enough psychologists and psychiatrists. We're going to lean on the MDs. And to do that, though, they're not psychologists and psychiatrists. They're going to need support. And that's where the digital therapeutic is going to couple in. So these new codes coming in right now. And I don't know what this is going to air right past this, but it's up to September 9th. The CMS is taking comments right now on who all should be covered with this. How should these codes work? But we know that there's three forms of them at the moment. One is going to be for the docs to prescribe it therapy. So you're going to go in and say, look, I'm not feeling great and I'm mentally not doing things I want to do. And they're going to go, I have something for you. And they're going to get reimbursed to match you up to a digital therapeutic, write the prescription. They're then got a second code for initiation, get you trained in using it. And then they got a third code for following you along month to month.
Wow.
And this is super legitimizing to the space, right?
Yes, carryover.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, a doctor, I mean, look, a doctor wants to give you whatever they can, but they don't have any more time. If you look at
Yes,
their
burnout.
reimbursement codes and their dollars.
Yeah.
I was just in, I was doing grand rounds with Sam the other day at Harborview, and one of the neurosurgeons got up and they presented what they used to make and they translated it into today dollars versus they had surgeries that they used to do in today dollars that would have been $12,000 for the surgery that in today dollars are now $850 for the surgery. Like,
Wow.
and this consolidation is going to keep going until we can find efficiencies. The only thing we can do is we kind of hit the soft targets. And there's not too many doctors that are going to scream when they still live in the 1%. I'm not remunerated enough, but they are really squeezed on time and energy. And so, it's important for them to get compensated for the work they're doing. And that gives them a reason to learn about this stuff, right? Then they know what they're looking at and the clearance really helps. But so we're in this trough of despair and we're climbing out. Sorry, Kiki, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say talking about the accessibility of it, but it also is going to help justify and build that trust in these programs and in these different, not everyone's going to see or believe all the benefits of these things right off the bat, right? And just like anything new, we're all creatures of habit. So changing is going to require a lot of additional support. So yeah, I think these regulations and reimbursements will definitely help push that and get people really interested and believing in these things and the benefit that they can provide.
Yeah, we got to get everybody to understand. And the thing about it, we're talking about a whole new field of medicine. There's only two places you can go to school to even learn this. I mean, there's folks like Toby that decide that they're going to do this. They're going to be video game based therapists because they figure it out. Right. Yeah. And then, and that's how a new industry like immersive medicine shows up is people figure it out. But eventually you're going to want them to go to school for it. It's going to become more refined over time. I think there'll be a point in time where courses in media are going to be taught to all MDs. Immersive medicine will be a specialty over time. I see all of this coming in time. But today we're in the trough of despair. So I think maybe if I can, I'll share this slide.
Yeah, go for it.
And we'll do the best to kind of transition this all over.
I also think this is going to help a lot with clinician and doctoral burnout that's happening right now, especially now we are getting a little bit more cognizant of those things and time and, making it easier for doctors to follow up their patients over digitally, that's just more time they have to connect with their patients. But yes, Ryan, take it away.
And just give us a little heads up for our listeners who might not be watching. What are we looking at here, Ryan?
Yeah, good point. So we're looking at how we got into the trough of despair with digital therapeutics. And my theory here is, and I think a lot of people's theory is there's three things, and I'm going to kind of take us through this. Want to be very respectful of the agencies and the folks involved, but also in plain language, just to move along. The first thing we saw here in the building of digital therapeutics, this is the wielding of media as medicine. And the first idea that came forward was gamification. Now, I want to be really clear. There's a lot of people that are very good at building media as medicine, and they say that they gamify things. But I'm thinking about the more generic form of the term that I've heard used over and over again when I'm in medicine, which is just gamify it. So a great example of this being a massive fail or understanding how the incentives don't work is the Fitbit. Fitbit sits on your arm, and every day you're going for a run, it broadcasts out to everybody that you're a wonderful human being getting 10 kilometers a day and running through the countryside until the day you plop yourself on the couch and start eating Cheetos, and then it tells everybody you suck, which you already know. That is the complete opposite of what has made media work in the past, what has made engagement happen. So the gamification fails I've seen is that we really did not look at who the subject matter experts were, who knows how to wield media. And so we just decided, we're going to make this fun by putting secondary game mechanics around things that already didn't have core play loops. And it turned out they weren't fun. They weren't dopaminergic. So you can't make medicine fun. You have to make fun medicine. And this has been something that's been 10 years in the understanding. And what you're looking at right now is a picture of chocolate covered broccoli with the word fail, because that didn't, you still taste the broccoli. The next thing that has got us in place is the FDA and the agency and the clearances. You got to understand that as far as the FDA is concerned, software is software is software. And if software is a medical device, it's SAMD, software as a medical device. They want it built a certain way. They want it made once, verified and validated, which is a series of tests that the code gets locked down and does not change. If it's going to be paired with a piece of hardware, they want to see it working like a pacemaker does. Dedicated piece of hardware, that piece of hardware never changes, and it's mirrored together with a piece of software that never changes. Now the FDA says, I'm very comfortable with this thing. You tested it, it's good, it's out in the field, and it's being the same thing all over again. That is a real problem, and it got even worse when the first of us came through. So the first that broke through the door had the first video game that was FDA cleared and all the rest of it. It's amazing that they got it done. But in a combination of, I was going to say, sort of a naive approach and the agency being overly cautious, they forced them into this very burdensome review process that was way higher than the risk profiles we're talking about. So it was like very expensive to make one of these. When we're trying to do something that's supposed to be accessible to care, it has to go through a path that the FDA is supposed to use called least burdensome. You shouldn't have to reprove what you already know, but we got in a really tough spot. Mm-hmm. So they wanted tons and tons of clinical data to back it up, more than would be rationally asked of other people making similarly risk device. And then they wanted it all locked down. And that's where we go back to another gamification fail. It's dynamic nature of media that is attractive to us. It's changing all the time. It's morphing to what we're doing in any one given moment. You know, a locked down piece of media is not going to be a attractive piece of media. So, you know, that clearance, and I mean, that can be, you know, if you're looking at Achille, they were around $30 million by the time they got through doing all this kind of stuff. That's just not feasible, especially when the next thing is reimbursements were DOA. And we talked about this last time. Those of us that have been in device a long time and know that what you're trying to do is get to the place where your accessibility and your affordability of care overlap through a reimbursement scheme or an over-the-counter selling mechanism that's lower cost enough that people can afford it. And we were watching these things get built, and there was no reimbursement waiting for it on the other side. It was just sort of this build it and it will come kind of model. And it was devastating because for the few that could get themselves through building a digital therapeutic that maybe had some level of engagement, or at least did things we wanted to do, ran the gauntlet of the FDA. On the other side of it was not the promised land. There was basically nothing there that that you could share or that you could do to get paid. So this is kind of the beginning of how we got in that trough of despair, because we raised a lot of money, we spent a lot of dollars, and there just was there really was nobody there to cover off on the other side of it. People didn't want to do it. The FDA didn't want to clear it, and nobody wanted to pay for it. And that landed us. And we decided to take a bunch of them public and raise a lot of money and evaporated about $3 billion as an industry, or $5 billion doing that. And that makes everybody get nervous. The people who invest in this, your venture capital people, they're, you know, they watch for these trends. They want to be on the front end of them. And then when it goes sideways, they go, whoa. So that's a long answer with a slide, but kind of where I think we're sitting right now.
I was going to say that leads right into my next question, actually. We keep talking about these challenges, but can you really hone in on what some of those challenges look like for developers and what kind of challenges they'll face when they're trying to get those products approved?
Yeah. So, I mean, it is, when you're a developer, Kiki, and you live in the game development environment, you want to live in Unreal, you want to, or run it, or run in your own custom engines or Unity or something like that. All of these things, all the ways that you make medical software, literally run counter to how you iterate and build a really good game, right? So the irony here, the thing that we'll be talking about 100 years from now, is it turned out the stuff that was absolutely best for you, the stuff that was most therapeutic, had to be made in a way that nobody wanted to approve it, right? And this, I'll share this one with you here. It's just crazy to see, and we've talked about this before, but here's kind of the representation of it, right? It turns out the most wildly therapeutic games that are out there, or media that's out there, period, for mental health at the moment, didn't land at the serious games, and it didn't land at some of the other places we were going. It's not the brain teasers. It's the really good games. And, you know, Plants vs. Zombies here. This is an amazing study where patients' clinical depression and anxiety were reduced more by adding a game to their gameplay than a second SSRI. right? That's a second serotonin reuptake inhibitor, a drug that, Animal Crossing, they have 30 years of data around this game. I love this. This is my favorite stat. You're just happier if you've played this game pretty much for the rest of your life. It sticks with you in a way that they've tracked and they got 30 years of longitudinal data. These are happier people, more connected people. There's a lot of social connections with it. But Tetris study is the one that got us all going, holy smokes, right off the get-go, right? This is where folks had got into an auto crash. They had gone to the emergency. And if they were well enough to fill out the emergency or the accident report, they were the control group. And then the other folks were asked to play. If you're well enough to fill it out, they would pull you to the side and say, okay, we want you to think about that accident for 20 minutes while you play Tetris. And then they filled out the accident report. So the only delta between the two was whether or not you got 20 minutes of Tetris in this time where you were making very formative memories and consolidating memory around what could be a fairly terrifying experience. And 62% of the folks that played the game had fewer intrusive memories and post-traumatic stress disorder than the folks that didn't. That was the beginning of, whoa, what's happening here?
That's
please.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, Pokemon sleep.
Yeah. So, it got even cooler, and I just switched over to this slide now where we're talking about, and starting first with Mario. This is one that blew everybody's socks off. It just came out at the beginning of the year. I got a chance to see it before it was readily available and shared it right away. And to date, it's still, we had over 100,000 views of that post, just this post about Mario.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And what it came down to is 46 individuals. So very much a pilot study. You can't extend this to the whole world, and they were broken into 3 groups. One group, but let me back up. They all had major depressive disorder. And all of us that work clinically, that's the sound.
It's tough. It's one of the hardest diagnoses to really work with, honestly. And it's widespread.
You want to keep people feeling good when you'll see them clinically with the situation. But what you basically know is that, you're staring at a world where they're going to have a high likelihood of things not going particularly well. Right. And so as a result of that, they did this test and they ran this study, and it turned out that they broke these folks into three groups. And it turned out the folks that played Super Mario Odyssey surpassed those that played Cogpack, which is sort of we'll call it a serious game or serious program for cognitive engagement, or those that receive standard clinical treatment, medications and psychotherapies. So 6 weeks into this trial, 50% of the participants with MDD were no longer diagnosable with MDD.
Wow.
Never seen anything like that before. Pokemon sleep is another, well-known situation.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that one a little bit?
Oh, I was gonna say I just downloaded it last week.
How's your sleep? Are you doing?
How has it been for you?
Hold on. I have not played it and had it on. I keep forgetting to turn it on before I go to sleep, but I just downloaded it. I did
that makes it sound like you don't need it if you're falling asleep.
No, rest assured, I definitely do need it nowadays.
Okay. So here's the big deal that I'm all excited to talk to everybody about. And so people thought Deepwell was maybe off being a publisher. Maybe Deepwell we put Zengens out there. What were we doing? What are we up to? Deepwell is looking to solve 2 of those 3 problems. First is to get people to understand that it's got to be well-built, dynamic media that is part of a digital therapeutic. And it's got to be allowed to change and flex. And then we wanted to work with a software development kit to get the barriers to the FDA down in a way that you still had to be efficacious, and you're still going to have to be something that is properly put together and built, but that you could use a software development kit to help get FDA cleared. The big announcement is we got that done. After 3.5 years, we can take media. Yeah, let's do that, because
it's amazing.
So we can take media, we can attach it to Deepwell's therapeutic engine, this DTX platform that we've got. And as a net result of that, you become part of the reimbursement stream with your media. Now, that doesn't mean every media is going to make it through, and we can have a whole episode on what's good media, what's bad media. I think that's a good thing for us to talk about.
Yeah, would be a good episode for sure.
But it definitely changes that. And the clearance is very broad. It allows us to use any media that doesn't bring in new areas of safety or efficacy. We can be on any mobile device, which if you know about the medical environment, again, they want to lock down one piece of hardware. We convinced them that wasn't necessarily true. And it's over the counter. So we can reach you on the platform you're already on, right? And that's really important. You don't want friction when someone's in a stress state and requiring certain levels of help. You don't want them to then have to do something harder than they're used to. Go get a new platform, change what you're doing, change how you play. That's the
And
opposite.
learn how to use that new platform too. There's going to be that
Yeah.
whole learning curve aspect as well.
Yeah. So the big news is there's 350,000 wellness apps, only 20 have FDA clearance, only 5 are for mental health, but only one is this SDK that can help people build more of these digital therapeutics and get media into the reimbursement stream, right? So, typically what we were saying is if you had something and it was working really well therapeutically, but you hadn't built it in a 62304 quality system, you'd have to build it again from scratch, do the verification, run a clinical test for efficacy, and then go through the FDA where they might look for more clearances. And then you would be able to pop out on the other big news, which is brand new reimbursement codes in 2025 for digital mental health therapeutics. So you can definitely run this route. And for some things, you're going to have to run this route. But for some media, you're going to be able to come and see us at Deepwell. We'll be able to do a media evaluation with you. Some of the people here are going to help us figure out what is the right things that fit into here. If it works, you're going to be able to add the biofeedback mechanism, and then you become part of this FDA cleared device. And that brings you access into the reimbursement stream. All right. So, and the reimbursement roadmap is, we're talking about today, over the counter, 71 million people in the United States who can get access to this, including 40 million children. So new accessibility care on the highest level. That's before the codes kick in. That's right now, just through being approved. And then when the CMS codes kick in, and I love this because this is where we're getting the Medicare and the Medicaid and 40 million more children being brought right back in. And, notice here that we're talking about this guy. At this point, it's physician direct prescribing, and you don't even go out of pocket in some cases. And then, of course, the next step to that will be up to the insurance level. And so you're going to see a very new monetization situation for media where, gaming is a big deal. It's, 280 billion a year in sales, probably on its way down a little bit right now. Unfortunately, mental health is somewhere between a $3 and $6 trillion spend annually, depending on how we look at it. And it's only growing through 2030. And so the coolest thing about this is to get access to the reimbursement map, you've got to make really good games. This is not going to be old school gamification. This has got to be super engaging. And it's got to tell good stories and have great play loops, really good agency calls to action, and manage the challenge condition like pros know how to do. But when you do that, you're not going to have to design yourself a whole new monetization situation, build the economics, or go to raise your money with people who are like, how are you going to do this in a freemium model so we can nail the whales? You're like, I'm not going that way. I'm going to tell a great story, play a great game, and I'm going to go this way. So it's going to change, I think, why media gets created, which media gets created. And I'm pretty excited about that.
Just for anyone who, I know what an SDK is, but in case anyone who might be more on the medical side who may not know what an SDK is, could you briefly tell us what's that? What is that? What is an SDK? What is a kernel?
Yeah, so it stands for Software Development Kit. So, and that's the last thing you saw up there. And we can get into this more next time that we get a chance to chat more. But it means that you can put this piece of software adjacent to the app you're building. Either you can put the biofeedback mechanism right into play, or you can have like a cool down room next to it, or that game can just be associated to a platform that has already amassed a group of games, and the kernel sort of recommending it, saying, hey, do a little biofeedback, answer a couple questions. We want to know who you are as a player. We want to know how you're feeling, and go do a little Animal Crossing. Come on back. Let's do a little Tetris. And you're going to be surprised some of the things that we're going to be able to say. Like for some people, it's going to be go do a little bit of Call of Duty. So there's a pretty good range of what's possible.
Never Overwatch.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how much it sounds like it's going to be very flexible, right? So
that's right.
It doesn't have to fit within this box, like you were saying with the FDA. This hardware, this software, it has to be this.
That's right.
It sounds like there's going to be a lot of ways for different creators and developers and people who really want to create these immersive experiences and media in this positive space to really
or who
access
already
the tools.
have, right?
Yeah.
And you want to go back and do it over. So we've come up with a way, we've done the lockdown stuff. We definitely give the agency stuff that's locked down. The therapeutic mechanism is locked down. The self-validating modules help make sure that the code is verified and validated and take care of it. But we've de-skilled that portion of it without taking any of the efficacy and controls out of it. So the media producer can do what they do well, make media and build this immersive medicine experience where we, interweave the media with the medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like a new golden age of media, right?
Yeah. I always
It's-
imagine
What
an
a
SDK
time.
like a skeleton. It's like the skeleton,
It's like keeping
And-
everything together.
basically.
Yeah, I love that. I really love
Yeah,
that.
I think of it like a seed, like a kernel, and
Mhm.
and it grows this. You can build a tree house after you build it, or you can cut down the tree and build your own
Yeah.
home, or you can just camp next to it, and it all works out the same way. The biggest thing is let's get this media out where it can do good, let's get people remunerated for making it, so it's not like somebody in a university trotting down to the computer lab going, "And you guys in here make video games?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to
Very
have to
exciting.
sign out with you guys today. I'm sorry this is a quick one, but
That's okay. We'll have to have another one of these for sure. I think there's so much more we can unpack with this topic. But thank you so much for your time today, Ryan, and sharing your expertise in this field. It's been very valuable to have you around.
I'll see you guys all soon.
All right.
Talk
Sounds
amongst
great.
yourselves. There you go.
We'll see you next time. Yeah, we'll just wrap this up real quick.
Mhm.
But yeah, this has been, really eye-opening for me. Really great to kind of get a better idea of this emerging landscape, and even where things are existing already. And it's been so fun to kind of hear everyone's responses and reactions and kind of personal reflections on that as well. Any kind of major topics or anything that really stuck out to you guys from our
FDA
conversation
approval.
today? Yeah.
That's really huge and the only one. So, you heard it here today. Take
Yeah.
note of that.
And the process, right? It sounds like such a rigorous process. And just getting recognized in general in the healthcare profession is just, it's difficult. It's a beast in and of itself. Kiki, anything that really, go for it. Yeah, sorry.
It's
Take it away.
definitely interesting I wanted to dabble more in the when we were talking about Tetris and how that was helping with like memory, how you're processing your memories and your PTSD and things like that. Pokemon sleep. I know that there are things like Oura Ring, for example, where I know Apple Watch does similar things as well, where there are things already out there to track your sleep, but like, does it, not to say everything needs to be gamified, but are you as willing to use those devices as you would to use like Pokemon Sleep, for example? Like that extra layer definitely entices more people than just having, just the same watch you wear all the time, or it just adds that intentionality to it.
Too, as well. Like, how many people just got regular exercise from just walking around?
I went out for a Pokemon Go walk today with my girlfriend. And
Same.
It was great.
Just out with my fiance.
Yeah, I think it's there. I think these things, definitely exist. But again, it's important to discern regulation. What is a wellness app? Like maybe Pokemon Go could be considered a wellness app, but without FDA approval, it's not a digital therapeutic. So keeping these things in mind is really important. And really great for our listeners to think about, or even developers or anyone who's interested in creating these experiences to keep in mind as this field is developing and growing, and as we work our way towards regulation and reimbursement.
Yeah, I also like how Ryan touched upon like gamification and how it's so broadly used. Of just slapping secondary game mechanics. I've seen that, and then the thing that I've also seen that always happens is that there's no carryover. There's barely any carryover for anyone who uses those kind of products, and you really have to think about integrating games versus just like having it as secondary like component of making it fun.
Yeah, and like I was saying before, like we're creatures of habit, so it's a lot easier the earlier you can plant that seed, the better, and the more time you'll have to see it flourish. So especially from an educator's perspective, it's like getting people who are our age or maybe even older to adapt these new skills or adapt these new technologies. There might be more hurdles than, for example, gamifying it entices it for children. It gets children involved and more used to these practices, and that now becomes the new norm. I think that's huge, because like meet them where they're at. They're already playing games. Why not make them impactful? Why not make them, add that extra layer to them? So I think
even though
even though Pokemon Go and Pokemon Sleep aren't FDA approved, I think it's still important for the younger generation and for students even coming up to kind of have that in their mind and tailor maybe their games or their products to at least start getting that ball rolling. Or you never know, that might just be their first project, but maybe their next one is going to be FDA approved or
Yeah.
Yeah.
EMA approved if they're in Europe, or
Yeah.
equivalent for if you're in Canada or other parts of the world as well. So I think it's definitely important to start getting out there.
Amazing. Great. Well, I'm just going to say thank you to everyone tuning in today. It's so great to have you with us. We're definitely going to have another conversation and episode about this to go more in depth and to pick more of Ryan's brain. For our next episode, I think we're going to have a guest, which is going to be really exciting. And we're going to maybe talk about, how these immersive experiences are created and get a behind the scenes kind of perspective on that. So tune in next week for our next episode. Thank you so much for everyone who listened and is following our podcast. If you'd like to get involved in the conversation, you can join us over on LinkedIn at the Immersive Medicine Network. You can find us at immersivemedicine.org, where you can send in your questions or topics if you'd like to get involved with this conversation. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, a great week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time on the Immersive Medicine Podcast.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.